totally dove into the 3rd chapter of Poppy Playtime, and I played through the game twice to make sure I didn't miss anything mega important. My 2nd run was all about hunting for Easter eggs, secrets, and other cool stuff. I checked out every nook and cranny behind every closed door, and even in the rooms where they did all those experiments. I did all this for real to share some hidden details along with my own theories and guesses with you. So here are 5 things you might have missed while playing the game. Number 1, Catnap is chasing you throughout the whole game. You can spot Catnap sneaking around in the background several times, and some of them are super easy to miss. I totally overlooked this at the very start, and yeah, on my first playthrough, I missed that entire scene, so can you not yell at me, please? Some are more obvious, but you might not have realized that it's like an exact replay of the scene with Huggy Wuggy from the 1st chapter. He was chasing the player too, and had a couple of moments that could have been easily missed if not for that. Number 2, Dr. White! The 3rd chapter gave us a bunch of videotapes with recordings that slowly unveil the factory's story. Most of them feature characters we're already familiar with, like Stella Rich, Harley Sawyer, and this mysterious unnamed scientist. But one of the VHS tapes introduces a character who, as far as I know, is totally new to the series, Dr. White. This tape tells us that kids will be chosen for something, and this employee encourages everyone else to clap and cheer them on as they say goodbye.
And here they all are.
Well, of course. They'd never miss this.
Look at Mrs. Brooks. Who's going away? Tell us.
This week, Dr. White here has selected our very own Samuel Lee. Now, before he goes, let's all give Sam one last goodbye, shall we? With me. 1, 2, 3. Goodbye, Sam!
It sounds like some sort of lottery, but we know what's actually happening is the employees are picking the next best candidate for turning into a doll. It's just another example of Playtime's manipulation, teaching kids to be happy about being chosen for a horrible and experimental surgical procedure that might fail. And even if it succeeds, your consciousness is trapped in a doll's body forever. Pretty nightmare stuff, so the fact they have these kids clapping is just creepy. But briefly on this tape, we can hear a person named Dr. White picking Samuel Lee as the next candidate for the procedure. We don't see any mentions of this person in this chapter, but given that his name is mentioned on the tape and in the credits, while many others are just named as scientists, his name might be important, but what's really interesting about this name is that it could be another reference to something in our own world. Dr. White is a children's story by author Jane Goodall about a little white dog who eventually visited sick children in a pediatric hospital in London and helped cure them, according to the official description. Everyone loves Dr. White, the fluffy doctor with 4 paws, a wagging tail, and an unconventional bedside manner, who works miracles with very sick children in the hospital. Despite his unconventional treatment, he's very successful. So we can't really use this as evidence anymore. Besides, many voice actors had multiple roles in Chapter 3. Number 3, the cardboard sign with Catnap is scarier than you think. Chapter 3 continues the tradition of character cutouts with voice lines, which have been a staple of the series from the start. These cutouts give a little insight into each character, often adding creepy or grim twists to create a horror atmosphere in the game. In Chapter 3, we get one for each of the smiling beasts, each offering a bit of understanding of their personality and, possibly, a bit of insight into how they achieve their goals. The main antagonist in Chapter 3 is Catnap, although his character is also a bit different from the others. It seems he doesn't have any dialogue like all the other smiling beasts. Instead, he sounds like a low growl or maybe breathing, but after a little sound tweaking, it just sounds like a child struggling to breathe. This could make total sense. We know that before becoming Catnap or Experiment 1188, he was Theodore Gramble, who underwent a scientific process. But from the case materials, we know Theodore was involved in a nearly fatal accident. He was secretly trying to help Prototype escape from the factory, something that required 2 green hands, and therefore 2 people. However, as we know, the green hands, Grackies, use electricity during the escape attempt. Something went wrong, and Theodore was fatally injured at that moment when 1006 was at the door and could have escaped, but he chose to take Theo back to pediatrician Thomas Clark for medical treatment, leading to his own capture. And yes, ultimately, Thomas Clark turns out to be brown, just as a side note, which makes it incredibly poignant that we defeat Catnap with a green grab of the hands and electricity, something that 1006 took with him when he lifted Catnap, from which potentially red and green hands we've now given him. Number 4. Hallucinations or nightmares are memories. In the 3rd chapter, we were always told that gas would play a significant role, right from the first teaser trailer, and in many theories later, we now know it's called red smoke, and it was previously used to keep the kids in the playhouse. But now we also know that the red gas indeed caused nightmares. In chapter 3, we see an entire scene that was just a nightmare. As soon as we enter the house, sweet home, a wave of red smoke transforms the surroundings into a more nightmarish version with creepy radios giving us scary backstory corridors that physically make no sense, and of course, the giant cursed Huggy. But if you paid attention, this whole scene was initially in our head. In this area, we have no help, and as soon as the nightmare ends with Huggy grabbing us, we find ourselves right where we lost consciousness. A fun fact about this segment, from which you can't run, is a very common nightmare that I actually have myself. So I like this little detail we hear in this area. In the credits, they even call it the nightmare tape, which makes perfect sense. The gas was used to sedate people, and it affected us. But if we were asleep, it also means that everything that happened during this episode came from our mind, came from our memories, meaning the player character already knew all this information about Elliot. It also means these areas were also drawn from our memories. Number 5, the teeth of Kissy Missy. Kissy Missy has been a mystery since her appearance in the 2nd chapter. She seemed to glance at us before apparently helping us, and then leaving, not at all how Huggy reacted to us. But in chapter 3, she seems much more hostile towards us, attacking us when leaving the house sweet home, and only when Poppy stops her does she calm down. Notice she seems very obedient to Poppy, though Huggy was described as having maximum obedience, but he's obedient to 1006. But if you take a close look at Kissy, I mean a really close look at her, you'll see she has these deadly teeth that Huggy had, and what now looks like a second smaller mouth. Maybe they just remained, and the developers used Huggy's model to create Kissy. But given how much work went into animating Kissy Missy, I don't think so. But what makes this whole moment so interesting is that we can hear how heavy Kissy Missy is, and knowing she also has these teeth, I'm sure the kiss is actually quite deadly. Just like Huggy, as shown, they're really a pair, which means if something attacked her at the end, it must have been something equally dangerous. Indeed, this moment made me go back and investigate, and it really seems like Huggy attacked Kissy at the end of chapter 3. If something really attacked Kissy, it had to be something pretty big, and I can't wait to find out about it in chapter 4.